The first thing is just be honest with yourself and your own vulnerability. And that's going to take the humility. That's going to take the killing of your ego, because you are not good. You're not good. And you won't be good for quite some time. And I ask my students, I said, was anybody here good at anything, ever in their life? You get a couple people raise their hand. I was like, what were you good at? The guy said, I was good at baseball. I said, when were you good at baseball? When did you think that you were truly good? He said, at the college level. I had perspective that I was good. I said, so how long did you practice baseball? He said, 15 years.
Time UFC vet, 15 MMA submissions, third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, dad, great guy, all-around inspiration, OG. Thank you so much, brother. Such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for the intro.
You just finished teaching a class?
Yeah, we had a 10 to 11 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. We were going over some crucifix and back take attacks. It's something that I wouldn't say is my back attacks is my main game, but crucifix is not. But it's something that I like to dust off on every now and then. And what a better way than to do so by teaching the students, you know?
I think that's one thing I always find so interesting is I teach one class a week for my instructor, but people that you teach all these classes, you've been doing this a long time. How do you keep from not doing, always teaching the things you're good at, and you have to also expand your game and work on things that maybe for your body type you'll never use, but for your students, it might be useful for them. So I feel like it's a constant, you've got to be constantly thinking, how do I keep this interesting? How do I not keep it? The long-time students don't want to get bored having the same sequences. So it's got to be challenging being a full-time instructor.
It is frustrating because just exactly what you said. First off, nobody is too good to do something more than once, right? Of course, like we still have to have our fundamentals. We still have to have basics. But like you said, the long-time students that have maybe seen that technique or me teach that series of techniques for many times, you have to have something, reason to keep them intrigued and always at least be able to offer like some higher level, more precise details. So it is a frustration. It is a weird balance because you have to teach to what the group needs, what the group wants, and what I want. I can't say that I need too much. I'm not too good to do fundamentals either. I'm just saying, like, if with my jiu-jitsu, where I'm at, I don't have any, crazy competitive aspirations really. So I don't need too much, but I want to do a lot. I always like seeing new guys doing new things. I want to play with new toys, but if the room isn't ready for that stuff, then I can't get to do it. So I have to put what I want to do on the side until maybe I get a more advanced room. Then there's what the group needs. So like we might have something that I would not call an intermediate class, but I might have something that the third technique is more intermediate, but then we have 4 people trying it for the first night. We don't get to do that series today. We just don't get to, I have to call the audible and put something else. So it is a balancing act, and it is not without its frustrations, because if we got to do just what I wanted to do all the time, either the guys would get really good or nobody would get good at all. It would be one of those two. I don't think it would be somewhere in between.
What do you think about the change in jiu-jitsu with all the nogi just exploding and all the leg locks and the whole new game? Because what I always try and tell people is when you compete, your game shrinks to the things you're really good at that you're going to pull off in a competition environment. And then with MMA, you have the elements of the strikes. It's got to be even more basic and simple and practical. What do you think of the game, the way it's growing so much?
I do like it. I have a battle with like the nogi explosion, not because I think that it's not good or doesn't help the jiu-jitsu scene. It doesn't really help me when I have these younger guys, the younger generation guys coming up, and they think like, oh, I don't even need the gi. And they might not, but it depends on what your goal is, right? What's your desired end state? But if you think that you're going to be this MMA fighter and you're just going to do no gi, go somewhere else. That's my actual opinion. You can just go somewhere else, because like I'm of the mindset that you can't mix martial arts until you have martial arts to mix. And if you don't have that and training under me, with my background, with the pedigree that I come from, with the great education that I got that no gi. I got that gi, I got that boxing, I got that Muay Thai kickboxing, I got that with a world-class strength and conditioning coach, I got that with world-class wrestling coaches, although my wrestling might not be world-class. I had really good education, and I'm going to pass that education on. And we have like some guys that think that their path to glory is going to be by just training no gi. And not to say that I'm a perfect instructor, far from it, but I just noticed that the students that I have that only train no-gi, meaning they have selected their schedule to only come to the no-gi classes. Maybe they sprinkle some striking in here or there, but they purposely avoid the gi class. Those are the students that are not getting any better at jiu-jitsu. Now, again, could be a fault in my instruction, but why is everyone else getting better at jiu-jitsu? Not gi, but just jiu-jitsu as a whole, by simply including the gi. And I think that that's kind of like a mix. It could be the mindset of the type of student that would purposefully exclude something would already mean that they're not of the right mind to get good or get good at a quicker rate. Then it's like, what does the gi really teach you? I think that the idea of push-pull is something that gets passed on at a very high level, but that body-to-body contact is expressed a lot better in no-gi, probably. And the level of discipline in the hand fight. Sometimes in the gi, right, you can make a grip, and they can make a grip. And whatever grips you make, it's like, oh, you're cemented within that grip set or some variation of that grip set, you know? Like, there's going to be a guy that if you guys make grips and you let go of those grips to address his grips, you're now getting thrown or something like that. So sometimes when you just latch on, that's just what you got. But I feel like with no gi, much like wrestling, when the hand fighting begins, it forces you to be much more disciplined. So I think that there are advantages that are gained from both, and that you should do both if you're just going to be like a martial artist, but especially if you're going to be a mixed martial artist. So no gi, the explosion of it is good, but also it can create problems, I think, on the incoming students, because I'm not going to do what they want me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do.
And what you know that they need, right?
That's right. And I'm sure you can go somewhere and get your jiu-jitsu rank from only training no gi, but not here. You don't get a black belt in judo for being a good wrestler. Why? Because they're not the same thing. It doesn't mean that you can't become a great grappler by doing wrestling, but you don't get a judo belt for being good at wrestling. It's the same thing, or to me, it's kind of the same idea. Brazilian jiu-jitsu is an art form. It is a martial art. The gi comes hand in hand with it, much like judo and the gi. Now, if you are a practitioner of judo, should you practice your throws without the gi? Yes, for sure, you should, but you're not going to get promoted based off of only doing no-gi judo, right? And I feel the same thing about jiu-jitsu.
I love what you said about mixed martial arts. You have to have the martial arts to mix first. And one thing I love when I was training at Team Curran with Jeff Curran is exactly like you said. I would do a boxing class with a great boxing coach with boxing shoes and boxing gloves. Then I would do a Thai boxing class, hitting the pads like a Thai boxing training class. Then if it was wrestling class, it would be straight wrestling. If it was jiu-jitsu, he has gi jiu-jitsu, no gi jiu-jitsu. And then you put it all together for the MMA sparring. And I always like that too. I always felt like, I've trained a lot of different styles for the last 30 years. And I think they're all beautiful. And I like to keep that traditional aspect where you're actually going deep in them before you start mixing them together.
That's right. And MMA is its own art, right? It is its own thing. That basically you have layers, and you want those layers to be seamless where there would already be seams. You can have some sort of striking art or arts, but then there's a seam there from going from that, and then you're going to try a takedown. And then on the ground into the groundwork with the ground and pound or the submission game, there are seams. You want to make those seamless. You want to make it just one game. And I'm saying this as somebody who did it the air quote wrong way, okay? Because I started my first introduction to mixed martial arts, or NHB, was just simply doing that. My first trainer, Cam McCarg, he did not have a jiu-jitsu rank. He's one of these semi-self-taught kind of guys. It was very, very good. Had really excellent submissions. All of the grappling we did was specific for an NHB fight. So the striking was specific for NHB. You don't want to stand like this, and you don't want to throw these high volume count strikes, because eventually you're just going to get clinched or grabbed. Everything was geared toward the fight. But I saw that when I went to American Top Team, that because I had not had the individual arts, I was not very precise. Now, I was good, in air quotes. I had fought many times, and I didn't have the seams that maybe some of the guys who were more precise had, but I didn't have the skill, the technical proficiency that they had. And it took me a long time to catch up. I feel that if I had, from the beginning, had a more structured path, that you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. Right. Yeah. And I felt like I paid later because I was catching up to the guys that had the more traditional background. So now that I'm trying to structure that and give that to my students, again, no matter what their goals are, if they are there just to train for fitness or for community or for fun because they're a fan, or they have competitive aspirations, maybe at an amateur level or a pro level, or just to do a Naga once every other year, they're going to get the same education. And I believe that the blueprint should be the same regardless.
So Cole, how did you get started in martial arts when you were a young kid in Georgia? What was the first thing you did?
The first thing I did was what I was explaining is I did MMA or NHB. That was my first exposure. I grew up watching Ninja Turtles. I grew up watching Power Rangers and pro wrestling and heavyweight boxing in the 90s. And I had two brothers, and we fought all the time, and Van Damme and Seagal movies and Chuck Norris. I watched stuff. We did it, and we would just do that stuff on one another. But my first, experience in real martial arts was 19. I was looking for something to do. Baseball in college, in my first semester of college had not worked out. And
was it just to train, or did you have aspirations one day of fighting?
Well, back then you didn't know what that meant to have aspirations to fight. I had seen Shudo videos. I had seen, were big fight fans in my house. So I'd already watched Pride. I already watched UFC. I was an educated fan. I knew what Shudo was. I knew what Deep was. I had an idea of what was going on, but I had been to a live fight before, but the guys were still good. I didn't know what I didn't know. So when I started to train, I was like, that'd be cool if I could fight one day, but I didn't know what that meant. Do you train for 10 years? Do you train for a year? I didn't know what would go into it to fight, but I was like, oh, that would be cool to do that one day. But those organizations that I had mentioned prior, those are high level organizations.
Yeah. And
I had been to one local kind of one that had popped up. I didn't know that these things were kind of going on all over the place, So when I started training, I had started to get the lingo and find out about the MMA.TV underground forum or the different forums back then. And then the Full Contact Fighter newsletter. And Grappling Magazine, I started to kind of get an idea, that there are these lower level promotions. And then my trainer was like, oh, we have a Georgia fight scene too. And I was like, oh, because where I was training at in Macon at the time, and then we would go to Griffin, Georgia. It's we didn't have that stuff there, but yeah. And then 5 months later, I started fighting.
That's crazy. So quickly. Wow. Yeah. I got people now that are new fans. They don't realize how kind of underground and low key it was back then. I remember when I was in college and I was training at a Thai boxing gym, and he was getting these VHA tapes of the Pride events, and he would sell them. He would do, make copies and sell them. And I remember I was watching one with one of the early Vanderlei Silva fights, and he had someone in the clinch, and he's just kneeing him in the head. And then I can't remember who it was. I don't think his opponent was super famous. And he just completely smashed him to pieces. And my roommate walks in, and she looks at what I'm watching, and she looks at me, and she's like, what is this? And why are you watching this? It was just that was gruesome part, She's never seen any martial arts, never seen any fighting. And she just sees this guy getting his face destroyed by Vanderlei's knees. And then she kind of just walks out. And I'm thinking, what's she thinking? I think I just moved in and I didn't even know her, But that it was so underground. People had no idea what we were watching. And then I think I remember there was another one where it was Mark Kerr's fight when he won the I think one of these early tournaments in Japan. He had three fights, and he just who did he beat? He beat Fabio Gurgel in the final, and it was just a brutal fight. Do you remember that one? Like,
wasn't that like Vale Tudo kind of?
Yes, he's some kind of exactly, and he basically broke his hands. Just he was in Fabio's guard, just smashing him to pieces, and he think it was stopped or maybe one decision, but it was just such a gruesome fight. And I remember watching that, thinking this is so crazy, and yeah, it was just like the early days. Whereas now it's a sanctioned sport, and you have just so many people that your ultimate fighting vet. For this latest season is so interesting because almost everyone is from these countries around the world where they have dreams about, aspirations about going to the UFC, and the career path is very, people like you and all these other people have shown the way. Whereas when you did it, like you said, there was no path to even follow.
Yeah, that's right. And the UFC events happened like 6 times a year, like every other month. Right. And so you would see, like, because again, small, right? I walk around at 165 pounds, thereabouts. And so they had no 145, they had no 135, they didn't have any of this stuff. So 155 for the UFC was we were going to get. And I saw like guys like Eve Edwards and BJ Penn and Carl Uno fighting, whatever, twice a year, or something like that. And it's like, I'm not going to be one of those guys, kind of like self-deprecating. It's like, I don't want anything to do with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, those guys are savages, So it wasn't like, oh, well, you have a direct path, like you're saying. And like, I was not really even a 55er, so I figured, I'll go fight in Shudo one day, and one day I'll be good enough to fight in Shudo. That was kind of like really all I wanted to accomplish.
So when you say your first fight was in 5 months, was that seems so quick to me. Well, you must have been pretty talented, kind of picked it up quickly.
Yeah. So me and my brother, we watched a lot of fighting. We would practice some of the moves. So we were not good. Okay. You can't be good by just like watching Pride and then simulating them, but we were not uneducated. So when I walked in for the first day, I was not blown away at what these guys were doing. I was not like, what the hell is this? These guys are barbarians. Like, my friend told me that he was taking me to a wrestling class. I was not like that. I knew what I was going in to do. And like, it was actually more mild than I thought it would be, because of what I had seen. So, yeah. And I say that it wasn't structured, and it wasn't, but it was about as structured as I could have anticipated. So, but my trainer, we had a small group. It was really honestly more like a fight club. And you would just kind of spar. He would say, what do you guys want to learn today? And nobody say anything. He'd say, well, let's train. So you start rolling, and he would like arm bar me. And instead of like letting go and resetting, he'd hold the position. He'd make me tap and then release and hold. And he would give me like verbal instructions to work my way out of it. Right. So it was not like, all right, class, we're going to do arm bar defense. And then it's like steps 1, steps 2, steps 3, steps 4. Now practice that for 10 minutes and we move on. It was not like that. We were training, and the more experienced people would kind of guide the less experienced. And then same thing with sparring. You would get hit or you would get kicked, and then they would tell you to check or adjust your stance or hit you with a barrage. And if you were kind of squirrely for a second, then maybe they just start attacking the body, So it was not nice, but you try to take care of people because we didn't have a full room. It's not like a lot of people in my community were knocking down the doors to try to do this because, again, it was not popular. It was still, MMA was the term that was kind of starting to be used. People were still using NHB as a term for it, Yeah. No, but not everybody could get good like that. Obviously, like some people need the systematic way of learning, and some people do better off of conceptual learning where they have a little bit more freedom to invent their own techniques. So I don't think that there's any perfect style, but due to that and the fact that I wanted to be good, I trained hard and I trained long. It started at 6:37, and we'd be training till maybe 10 in Macon and maybe like 1 o'clock in the morning in Griffin. We would just go. We'd take little talking breaks. But I remember training so hard, I could not crawl to get to the Gatorade across the room. That's how tired we would get. We would just go all out. So I think that if you train like that, not that you could be good, but that you could be at the time good enough to fight. You had to train. You still had to put the hours in.
And I'm sure that, yeah, like that immersive atmosphere training for hours like that, your body has to adapt, your mind has to adapt. So how did the first fight go?
Well, it was 2 fights that night. I faced some guy I was like 19. And the first guy was 30, 31. And I had knocked him down. It was like partial slip, partial knockdown. And leg kicked him a bunch of times and then kind of rained down like 50 unanswered punches. And the fight was, excuse me, stopped. And then the second fight, the guy was a little bit older, tougher, kind of like construction worker kind of strength kind of guy. Like he had a different kind of grip strength and isometric strength. Whereas the first guy was a little bit more of a kickboxer. And I think I went to throw in high kicks or something. Maybe he took me down and I triangle choked him in whatever, under a minute.
Nice. Okay.
So I had a good debut. And it was crazy. Like we were supposed to fight in Columbus, Georgia. And that was like 2 hours for me. And at weigh-in day, the people who were the owners of the fight venue, they canceled the show. They said, no, you can't do that here. Because they said what we were doing wasn't Christian, you know? This is a long time ago. This is, again, we can't like reiterate to anyone listening enough that it's like, this was not what it is now, you know? So these people in Georgia, West Georgia, they said that's not Christian. So they canceled the event, but the promoter was like scrambling to find something. Well, just across the state line in Phoenix City, Alabama, it's basically the same town. They touch one another, but there was like a rec gym, Parks and Rec gym or something that, found out what we were doing. They were like, yeah, you can do it here. So venue changed the day before. There were like 250 people there, but some other good fighters fought on the card, Rafael Assunção. I think he fought on that card. Ryan Ellison, he was like a really good fighter at the time. He fought on the card. So there's some tough guys.
Crazy. Yeah, the last minute changes. I remember cutting weight for a fight, and this is a local Midwestern show in Chicagoland area. And I'm cutting weight, and then I get a message from the promoter, and he's like, the guy just pulled out. And I'm just like, oh, these other things, 2 months of training, thinking about the fight for the last few weeks, having this mild level of anxiety that I had. So I'm not sure if you had it, but just like you can never fully relax because 3 weeks I'm fighting, and then the last minute pullouts, that happened a few times. But that one was weight cut was rough, It's like, oh, all that work.
I had 10 amateur fights in amateur in Georgia meant that you just didn't get paid.
Right.
Yeah. And we use elbows in Georgia, but we did use elbows in some other states I fought in. So, but I had fought 10 times from November of 2003 to February of 2005. Wow. And at the time I had a surgery and I had like 6 or 8 fights fall out.
Wow. So you trained for close to 20 fights.
I'm talking about like, because I was young and I was living in the moment, and I just like whatever this thing is, that feeling of, for me, it was freedom, and I didn't like true peace to be in that ring or cage. Like it was, I felt really at home in that thing, in that environment. So I didn't want to do anything else. And again, I didn't think I was going to fight in the UFC because they didn't have even my weight class. And there was no path. I didn't have any of these like dreams, because if you were like my size, you couldn't even dream to be world champ because the UFC even removed the lightweight belt. There wasn't even a lightweight champ. Wasn't even a dream that I could put on 20 pounds to be champ because they were getting rid of the class, So I was just like, oh, I just want to fight.
So how did you go from being those amateur fights to getting the opportunity to be in the Ultimate Fights show?
So I had the amateur fights, and then I was still training in Georgia, and my coach agreed that it was time for me to turn pro. And I fought 5 fights in with that trainer, that stable, before I moved to American Top Team. I had met a guy that had from South Florida, Charles McCarthy. He fought in the UFC a couple times. He was training originally with Freestyle Fighting Academy with the Avalon brothers, and he moved to Georgia for a time, maybe a year, and he kind of took me under his wing. And then when he went back, we maintained contact. We were buddies, and at some point he changed teams, and he said, "Hey, you gotta come out here and check this place out." He's like, "This is crazy. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Just the level of professionalism and organization." And so I got a fight in Key West, Florida. I think he was acting as my manager, I think, or Matthew Waller may have still been. I'm not sure, but I ended up getting that fight, and I think I flew to Miami maybe, and then we drove to Key West, but I was maybe in town for 5 days before the fight, and I was in the gym, and like Howard Davis Jr., he had for me, and I got to train with the team that week without getting injured because I had to fight that week. But I was just like, I have to get here. Like, whatever this is, I have to be here because that's where the most serious guys were. And I had never seen so many jiu-jitsu black belts. I had never seen that many in the room or that many people training at 11 a.m. You know, you got 40 people in the room at 11 a.m. You know, that doesn't where I come from. There's nobody in a room at 11 a.m. There's no team that trains twice a day like that. You know, so again, I don't have a dream of like doing anything other than like being in Shudo one day. But I did have an idea about what it took to be a professional, you know, like, oh, professional people, you know, they practice more than anybody else. You know, you would hear about like Tyson or these boxers coming up. You see the HBO 24/7s. No, they wake up early. They go and they train and then they sleep and then they go train again. So like I already had an idea of like, oh, professionals train multiple times a day. So, but the only place I ever saw that was doing it like that. So I moved there. I found a college that was taking late applications and I filed for a bunch of grants and I just moved to, it was in Miami Shores called Barry University. And I moved there and because I had no money and I just basically used the dorm as like an apartment. I went to class, but I was still going to the gym twice a day. And I was fighting that the whole time I was like in college, just fucking off, not really taking college serious, never declared a major, made fine grades. I just never took any advanced classes because I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Was that hard for you to move, or was it just an easy decision because you had such a? So I feel like some people now they recommend any young person to do what you did, like find a place with world-class instruction and just go all in and move there. But
yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot of people have a lot of ties to where they're from, and it's hard for them just to pick up and move.
Yeah, and I had like the level at my team at the time was not high, but I had kind of reached maybe not the most I could have learned from my instructor, but I was pretty close. I was at that point where like, this is maybe not it. I didn't overstay that point, but I was like, I'm pretty close to the ceiling. And so I already had an idea that I needed to go somewhere. And I was not interested in maybe some of the schools in Atlanta at the time, which were known as like, they were good. They had good guys, but they're more of a party scene kind of thing going on there at the time. And I was like, no, I want to take this like for real. So it was very easy for me. I had ties where I was from. I had great friends. I moved back here, obviously, to be around that community. So I love this place, but I had to go. I had to see, you know, what it was that I was made of. And that was really what it was all about. I was like a personal quest, a personal journey to test myself and what I found to be one of the more difficult things that I could even imagine a single person doing to try to evolve and really kind of a path of seeking defeat to where I could kind of come out the other end of that.
I love that. That of doing it to see your potential. That's exactly why I did. I know I was always in the regional scene when I was fighting, but it was always about, it was from 30 to 35. And so I was a bit older, but it was like, I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to see my potential because we have a lifetime to have careers and make money. We can be doing that at 60, 70, 80, but we have these small windows where we can really try and fulfill our athletic potential. So I think that's so cool. You have that same mindset.
I completely agree. And I think also you only have that small window to do something like truly difficult, right? Whether it be athletic or not. Like you don't see people who are 50 start to play chess and become world champion. Why not? Because even like, it's not your athletic prime, your prime in general for many is going to be somewhere between like that 25 to 35 time frame. I think that your mind is primed, you are open, you are ready to receive information, and your body is obviously very capable. So I think that that's another reason that it's good to do it somewhere around that time. But that doesn't mean give up and don't pursue things as you get older. You definitely should, because you should be trying to test yourself at every single age. But the limits of what your capabilities are definitely less at some of those ages. And by the way, they are less when you're 15 than they are when you're 25. Again, there is a prime time for you to get into something.
I'm so glad you said that, because it just reminded me, there was a English philosopher, Bertrand Russell, I think he won a Nobel Peace Prize later on, that he spent 10 years when he was, I think, in that prime, 25 to mid 30s or something like that, where he was working on this mathematic textbook. And he did all these crazy advances in mathematics. And he said his brain was never the same after that, because he went so deep and so hard. He was like, I could never take my mind to those kind of places again. And I hadn't thought about that. I always just thought when you're young, it's like, yeah, that's the only time you have to do something athletic because you're young enough. But you're right. It's the only time you can really maximize and go deep, really in a lot of different things. Because like you said, I want to be a lifelong learner. When I'm 70, 80, I still want to be learning things, but it's not the same. It's not going to be the same intensity or the same depth.
That's funny. I've never heard that said before. I thought that maybe I was the only person that kind of felt like they couldn't quite do what they once could. I feel like that sometimes too, that I put so much of myself, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually and mentally, that now I don't want to say burned out, because I'm still here and I'm still doing it. But to the degree that I went hard before, I can't go that hard anymore.
Yes. And you said that story about when you were young and you were training, and you said, you trained so hard that you were crawling to get water or Gatorade. You just that exhaustion, it's harder as you get older. I think you're 40 now, right? I'm in my mid 40s. Just, we can still push ourselves, but it's very difficult to push ourselves to that level of intensity that we could when we're young. And I think there's something very, like from an evolutionary perspective, back in the day, from an ancestral period, we did everything much younger. And I think there's all these studies about a lot of males' risk tolerance actually peaks somewhere around 20, and then it slowly declines. And that comes to when you're young, you're really trying to prove yourself. And then as you get older, people started families a lot younger back in the day. So your risk tolerance has to go down, because you want to be around to raise your kids and be more of a protector and a provider. But when you're young, you're really trying to prove yourself. So it's just, I think from a hormonal level, from a physical level, from a intellectual level, there's so many different areas where it's just harder to do things as you get older, but we should still try. And I think that's why it's so awesome that you're in here still trying.
Oh, hi.
But yeah, it doesn't get easier, Cole. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I will still be pushing myself in different aspects, the rest of my life.
Yeah, same. But in order for in which ways? Like, this is where we have to be more selective as we get older. I feel like when I was younger, it didn't matter what it was, like something I didn't care about. I still really would have invested some time just to, see what my worth was in that thing, like bowling, I'm going to be I'm going to go and I'm going to be trying to be competitive with my friend. Like, now I think that we have to be, as we get older, more selective with the things that we want to put our energy into.
Yes. We have less energy, so we've got to be more selective what we're putting there. So when you went to American Top Team, it's so funny because it's still one of the top gyms today, but you must be the top gym. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the amount of champions, right? They must have the record for the amount of champions out there.
In the past 6 or 7 years, we've gotten MMA Gym of the Year. So we are awesome. The team.
Gym. Yeah, the gym. But you're the early pioneers. So from there, was that I'm sure they had a lot of good relationships with the UFC. Is that how you got the opportunity for the show?
Yeah. So Charles McCarthy was managing me at the time, and he had already been in talks with Joe Silva, right, about getting me direct to the UFC. One time I had fought in Richmond, which I think is where he was living, Joe Silva, that is the matchmaker for the UFC at the time. And Joe Silva was like, okay, if he's fighting on the card, I'll go and I'll watch that card and I'll tell you what I think, and I went and fought this guy, really tough guy. And Dwayne Shelton is his name, good fighter. And he belly to belly suplexed me. He was one of the strongest guys I think I had ever felt. And I think he was the first guy to ever drop me also. And so all that happened in the first round. And at some point in the first round, I recovered from that, like hip heist or hip bumped him in the mount and, hit him with some ground pound. I ended up winning in the third round, but it was clear that I had some things to work on, but like Joe Silva recognized like, oh, this kid's got some potential. He's got some moves, but he's also got a chin and he's also got that heart. There's no quit. So I think that that's when I was truly on the radar. Like they knew my name, they knew my face, they knew, oh, we're going to keep an eye out on that. So every single time I'd get a win thereafter, like they'd send a text like, oh, hey, Cole just won again, Cole just won again, Cole just won again kind of thing. So, and then I had fought in Shudo in Japan. I took that fight on like 5 days notice. I had to get the passport expired, and I fought the world champ at the time, Lion Takeshi Inoue, and he was world champ, but I was going to face him in a non-title fight, and I went all 3 rounds. I still feel like I won that fight, and I did not get a rematch, right? So I fought the world champ, took him the distance, really competitive fight, like really. That's on YouTube and on UFC Fight Pass. So if you can go watch that, it's fun. It's a good fight to watch. But so I had seen higher level of competition testing also at the time. And we were trying to find a way for me to get directly into the UFC. We were going to like put me on like felony fights or something like that, something to kind of get some like attention, to find a way to get me in. And then we got the call from Joe Silva that they were going to be doing an Ultimate Fighter. They were going to try to reinvigorate the UFC's lightweight division with some new talent. And that wanted me for it. They liked me, but that I just needed to go to meet with the producers. Now the producers there was already going to be a tryout in Hollywood, Florida, which is next to Fort Lauderdale, so 20 minutes away from where I was at. So I went in, did the thing and got to the interview process. And then you make the first cut, then the second cut, and then, got all the way through. And so I got pushed through. So that's kind of my journey to the Ultimate Fighter.
So looking back now, I think it must be so difficult. 2 things. One, to be around the people you're fighting socially and all the time. For me, that would be so difficult. So that's one. And then the other thing, just no communication. They take your cell phone. That's got to be so hard too. You're from all your friends and family. How, looking back now, how hard was it? Or were you so young and hungry, just none bothered you? You just took all in your stride?
Yeah, I think that I was young and hungry, and what it kind of meant to me with the level of seriousness was not the same as when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I was looking, like I said, for that defeat, for that personal journey, for that person that could make me a different man. I wanted to find that, right? So being around these guys, that's exactly what I wanted to do, was being around. Like, it didn't mean anything to me to, talk with somebody or befriend somebody and then have to go in there and do the thing. Like that was not. But as I had gotten a little bit older, and it became a little more like, hey, you can get for real hurt in here. You can die in here. You can get real lifelong injuries in here. It became something different for me. It became a little more serious. So I think just at the time with my youth, it was not really that big of a deal to me.
It's awesome. Well, when you look back at all, you had so many fights, you had some incredible submissions. Is there some moments that's out? Because one of my biggest regrets, Cole, is I had 1 amateur and 9 pro fights and about 25 boxing fights, and almost all of them are just blurs. Like, I have very few where I have really good memories and deep memories. For me, it was always about getting it done and then just relaxing afterwards. And it was really only the last fight where I knew this is going to be the last one. I'm going to enjoy the process, where I remember everything. I enjoyed the process. Luckily, I won. And I have so much, I live in regret, but one of my big regrets is I didn't enjoy the journey more when I was in it, when I was in the moment. So now when you look back at your career, you had all these incredible highlights and moments. Do you think that you really lived it and enjoyed the moment, or is it a bit of a blur when you think back in your memory?
Yeah, I somewhere in between. I'm very focused. I didn't party a lot. And then I go out and drinks like anybody else, or after the fights. I had some good times, some memorable times, but I did not enjoy the process. It felt like Groundhog's Day every single day, over and over, repeated process. I was very serious, very dedicated, very disciplined. And I maybe didn't have as much fun as I could have, but it meant everything to me. And in that, I think that, and I still kind of am this way, I'm always focused about the next thing and the next thing and the thing that's in front of me. And then once that thing is now behind me, I'm focused on the next thing. So I don't really have a whole lot of, great memories. I have a couple, moments that kind of stand out, but I did not enjoy the process. And I would honestly say that a lot of it was not enjoyable. It was very hard, what I would do to my body, and there was definitely, like kind of like the payout. There's, of course, like money isn't the most important thing, but like I would say that for the work that you put in and like what you were getting out of it, the juice was not always worth the squeeze. And that made it, maybe that also contributed to the lack of enjoyment sometimes.
Well, what you said was so interesting, Cole, about you're always looking forward. And I found that I remember reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, and he talked about, he's done all these amazing things in his life. And he has this, like, all these photo albums from all these years of travels and great achievements. He's like, I never ever open them. I never look at them, because for me, I'm always looking forward. So I feel like for success, you have to have that mindset where you're always looking forward. But for happiness, you have to pause and look back, like take a moment and just kind of look back at the things you've done and be proud of it. So that's what I've been juggling with my whole life. When I was young, I was always looking forward and never seeing how far I've got. And then last night I was looking back at old boxing photos. I put some stuff on my Instagram stories. I just had all these little trip down memory lane, and it was awesome. But it's like stuff that I never really think about. I never think about my past. I'm always thinking about moving forward. So that's such an interesting dichotomy.
I think also not that I can't share things with people here in my town. I can, but with the community that I came up with, like at ATT, with the guys that I came up with, if you're gonna kind of go down memory lane, it does help when you're kind of going down that lane with people that were there, And I don't have too many people that were there on that ride here where I live now. So I maybe purposely try not to go down that route sometimes. Not that I'm not proud of what I accomplished. I just, sometimes it's like, there's still more to do. I'm still kind of like that,
As a jiu-jitsu guy, I remember when I watched live when you beat Fabian Schill. He was like this high-ranking George Gazelle, sorry, he beat George Gazelle, and he was this, I think it was like a 3rd, 4th degree black belt. He was like a, stud jiu-jitsu guy, and you were a purple belt at the time, and you submitted him. Is that one of your favorite memories? Because that's just for a guy representing jiu-jitsu and MMA, that must have felt so good.
That's probably my first favorite memory, because I put my body through hell to get to that point. I put my mind through hell to get to that point. Sometimes like have to kind of go to some dark places and kind of see the fight going different ways and get yourself, maybe do some of the work. And you have to face yourself. You can't live a fake bravado. You got to be real honest with yourself in some of these training camps with the places you have to go. And I did a whole lot to get to that point and to come out of that victorious. And I just remember like having the support from my team, the belief from my team. That long way. And that was that favorite memory that, I dug deep. I did find somebody who could test me and help make me a different person in that.
You said, so you push yourself physically, but also mentally. I think that's one, when I look back up, I think I did a good job of pushing myself physically to the limit, but I think I never worked on my mind. I never really did visualization. I wish I'd been a bit more knowledge about, mindset and mental training. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like when you say you push your mind to dark places too?
So one is like, you have to face like your fears. We all have some fears and we're not anything crazy. It wasn't like I feared stepping in that cage, or the fear of losing was not like something that was a big deal to me, but it's more like you don't want to feel regret. You don't want to feel like you didn't put out and work hard enough in the training. Like these are feelings too, So for me, I really focused on that. And I never saw myself like a guy getting his hand raised. I would see myself on the other end, like getting brutally knocked out, like dying in the back with a brain hematoma in the locker room, like getting my arms snapped off. Like, would I be like submitting, which always left a bad taste in my mouth, the idea of tapping it out. I didn't like that. Like, or see the bone break, or see yourself get knocked out in so many different ways. And, visualizing that all the fucking time, all the time. And then on fight day, I felt like because I'd seen all of that stuff happen and worked through all of it already, now I was truly free to fight the fight like that I was ready to fight, because I had already seen every possible outcome and made at peace with it. So when I got into the cage to fight, it's like, okay, let's get in here and let's just do it.
That's so interesting because I feel like some people want to always visualize themselves winning and they never even want to imagine themselves losing. But you kind of reverse engineered it and you imagined all the bad possibilities first, and then it's almost like that's out the way. Now I can focus on the fight that I want to fight.
I would not recommend that for everybody. I think that psychologists would tell me that something is very wrong with me and I did it the wrong way. But that's the way I did it, and that's where I was at the time.
Cool. Okay. So one thing that I really admire about you is you seem like you've done a really successful transition out of fighting. And something that I never would have understood if you'd asked me in my 20s when I was working and I was successful in my career at the time. And if someone had said, hey, like if you had a sabbatical and you had a few fights, would you miss it after? Would it be hard mentally to change? I would have said, no, of course not. I have so many interests. I have so many other things. It wouldn't be hard at all. And yet still for me, it was very difficult shifting that identity when I stopped fighting and just getting older and do that. And it gives me such an appreciation for people like you that full-time fighters at a young age, you made a career out of it. You made a name for yourself. You so much positive identity through the UFC. Then when you come out of it, even though yours is the best possible scenario, you run an awesome gym, got American Top Team affiliate, you're still doing jiu-jitsu, your body seems like in good shape, but it's still. Can you talk a little bit about that transition? So I feel like you did it so well, and even so, you said there were still some dark moments, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I was talking about, like the juice not being worth the squeeze. Sometimes I think that when I really made the transition, I was planning on just pausing for a year. I'm going to take a year. I'm going to set up my gym, and then I'll come back and I'll do it again. And it just didn't happen. I trained for a couple fights, and they just didn't pan out. And then I ended up having a shoulder surgery, and then I recovered from that. Kind of felt like maybe I was going to do it again. And then I started having neck problems. I ended up having neck surgery, a year ago. I got 2 new cervical discs from Dr. Igor DeCastro, a judo and jiu-jitsu black belt here in Macon, Georgia. He did a really good job from the Georgia Neurological Institute. And now I had no problems with that. It's just the rest of the body started to fall apart. And then, not just being an owner, but being a vital reason for making this. It's not like I just like popped open the doors and hired 6 people to run the gym so I could go live my life. I'm very much here and have been here this entire little over 7 years now. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. And there's like behind the scenes stuff. And I didn't know what all that entailed. I just knew that I was ready for a little bit of a change of pace. So that was actually super helpful, was that I was kind of burned out. I wanted to take a year off anyways to make this transition. I always wanted to have my own academy while I was fighting. Really, I should have started it sooner. That financially, that would have been the best thing to capitalize on some of my success. There would have been people who would have just loved to have trained just because of what I was actively doing at that time. Even if I was not, a mainstay in the academy. Let's say I had a school here in Georgia and I was training at ATT, people would have loved it anyways, But
That's interesting, Cole. Is that because you saying if you started it earlier, because they would have seen you in the UFC at the time, even if you weren't present, just by being a bigger brand, a bigger name, it would have been better for you? Yeah.
So if I could have gone back, I probably would have started a little bit sooner. But I was motivated to make the transition. I just didn't know it was going to be, I wasn't going to fight. Again, I didn't know that, at the time. But
isn't it a very different thing though? Like when you're with world-class instructors who are training you for these big fights, and now you're on the other side where you're mentoring, you're coaching, you're inspiring others, your students. It's a very different feeling, and it's something I feel like when you're fighting, it's not in a bad way, but it's very selfish. It's about all the things that you're getting for yourself. Whereas it's a very different satisfaction when you're seeing, like you said, not maybe you're coaching fighters, but what about the student that comes in who they're bullied, and then you give them confidence and you see them walk in the gym standing straighter and all these other little things, like you're really affecting people's lives. But it's a very different life to be.
Yeah, I would say that coaching what I'll just call the regular guy or regular gal or regular youth student, that brings me more satisfaction than the MMA people.
Wow.
Because I find that the MMA people don't listen. They don't listen. Because I think, like you said, that there is some selfishness that goes into it. Of course, you have to be very devoted, but it's like sometimes it's they think that they know it, or they're like, oh, he liked to do it like that, but I'm going to do it this way. And it's like, man, I'm trying to give this to you, but they don't listen. But the regular student listens, you know? So I think that they value the information a little bit more. And I think that that just comes from, I think that really, not that this is about money, but financial investment is important. The reason that my son has been training 4.5 years and isn't any good is because his mom and dad aren't paying someone to teach him, right? And he got invested. Right now, if you turned around and went back to college, let's say you're going to pursue a PhD, I bet right now you would be so much more tuned in and you would make the best grades versus like when you were like an 18-year-old kid. And let's say that your mom or dad paid for your college. It's like, there's no shame in that. It's just, you don't know what it is to be financially invested in something when you're younger and coming up. Well, the regular student who's here, who's either their parents are investing in them or they are investing in themselves, I feel like when you give them the information, they're really going to dial in on it. They're really paying attention. They have their goals, right? And what it's like, I don't care what the goal is. I'm going to give you that same like Ivy League education and martial arts that I got. And I'm going to be as precise in the transmitting of the details as I possibly can. Right. But if you're paying for it, you're going to pay attention more. And if you're, an MMA guy who is maybe given comp training or it's a percent of your purse, how big is your purse going to be unless you're playing on the high cards? Come on. It's like, you ain't paying any bills here. I feel like if you're not truly paying for it, you're not really going to respect the knowledge transfer that's happening.
That's so true. That's such a, they say if you get something like a course or something, if someone gives it to you, you're never going to take it as seriously as if you spend a lot of money on it. And it hurts the like buying it, then you're going to value it more. So that complete sense.
But then the other end, they say, if you love something, you'll give it away.
Yeah.
But if you give it away, you're giving
People
it.
don't value it.
They won't appreciate it. That's right. So it's, like I said, I personally get more satisfaction out of seeing the regular guy, that regular youth student make that jump, whatever that jump is. It might be the first time they pull that move off. It might be the accomplishment of their goals by getting that next belt or competing for the first time, or the youth student, just like I pay attention to them. When I'm saying I never really pay attention, meaning it's like, oh, they're a student, giving them the data. I'm telling them to correct the moves. But when I actually stop and I go, holy crap, that kid's been here for 5 years. And then I go back in time and remember what that kid was like when they started with us. And now I see the way that young man or young woman has developed. And like, that gives me the satisfaction.
Yeah.
Or with military or law enforcement, or like I said, it doesn't matter. It's like those more so than the MMA people.
Right. But the one thing that I've really noticed when I started, I feel like most people were doing jiu-jitsu. They wanted to fight one day, or there was a lot less sport jiu-jitsu then. It was more for the fighters. And now there's so many of my friends who have never done any martial arts, and they'll send me a photo of their 6-year-old, like, hey, my daughter just did their first competition. Or it's so many people who aren't, they're not in martial arts, they're getting their kids into jiu-jitsu because they're seeing all the benefits for kids, for confidence and all these other things. And you and I know those benefits, but it's also our kids are, we both have boys, and you want to give them the gift of martial arts, but also they're not us. So we don't want to live vicariously through them. But if they don't naturally take to it straight away, we have this weird balance where we know the gifts that it'll give them, but it's hard. You don't force your kids to do things that they don't love. So how's that? Like, do you have advice for parents that want to give the gift of jiu-jitsu for their kids?
No, dude, because like I said, I'm trying to figure this out too. We're dads. We're just trying to do our best. I'm trying to find that balance. If I had that, or I would tell you guys the secrets. My son, he's been training a little bit. When I say training, I mean just kind of coming to class since he was 5. He does not train twice a week since he was 5. He's not some little stud. He's not good, okay? But he's a sweet boy. He is a good boy, and I love him very much. But I don't make him go twice a week or 3 times a week because I don't want him to get burned out and hate this. And I don't make him do this because I don't need him to live vicariously because I did it, or me be vicariously through him because I actually did it.
Yes.
And since I did it, I know for a fact I don't want him to do that. Okay, that is very hard, that thing that I did. So I'm looking at him right now as I'm talking to you, and he's on a balance ball and he's just flopping around. Like, that's good for him, But I think that, like you're saying, right things, but I don't have the solution. You don't want him to get burned out, but you want him to have this thing that is going to be the greatest thing for his life and could be the best gift that we ever give them. But you don't want to ride them to the point that they hate it.
Yeah.
So, but you want them to take it serious because it is serious. What we are talking about is serious. Like, jiu-jitsu is fun, yes, but like when you talk about your standing up to a bully or standing up for another kid who's getting bullied, or if he is actually violently attacked, being able to defend himself, or having the confidence, or when it comes time for him to have a mate, a spouse in life, that person is going to want him to be able to protect them. No one wants a person who is weak. That would not be an attribute that anyone would find attractive. Anyone. Someone goes, you know what? I want somebody who's really weak. They don't say that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be some apex predator, but simply having the ability to defend yourself, not kill everyone in the room, but just defend yourself. That would be an attractive trait to somebody. Oh, if he can defend themselves, then he could defend me, or he could defend our children. So that value does exist in jiu-jitsu or martial arts in general, right? And the things that go along with it, the confidence that you carry, the way that you walk, the way that you talk, these are things that you are going to get through that martial arts journey. And the other things that are also admirable traits, like respect and courage and discipline and humility, having a persevering type of attitude with that indomitable spirit. Like, these are things that someone would find attractive, that you would find attractive in yourself. So when I say attractive, I don't mean everything is to satisfy other people. I'm saying, when I say attractive, I just mean positive. Okay. So martial arts can give this to your children. And then you see people who have a widespread audience like Jocko or Joe Rogan or whoever. And what are they all saying? The same thing that we're saying, like, give the gift of jiu-jitsu to your kids. They're all saying that. And so they know they have unlocked the secret that we know to be true, but how do you convey it? How can you give it to your child when you're not just money and getting the membership? If you're actively taking participation in it, because like you have a black belt, I have a black belt, I'm trying to take an active role in participating in that guidance, but it's because it's dad or even dad's academy. I don't have that balance figured out. So I wish that I had advice for the parents, but the first piece of advice is what? Just getting your foot in the door. If your kid is not training jiu-jitsu, get them to go into the door. Every place has a free class or a low enrollment special. Go try that 1 week or try that 1 month, and go try the other schools in the area and see which place you like best. And when I say like best, there's going to be like, what's the student populace like? What are the other children are like? How do they blend in with those other kids? What about the coaches? Like, how's he blending with the coaches? And then you have to evaluate all those things together.
I really love what you said about attractive qualities for yourself. And I've been thinking about, I'm still many years away from having these conversations. He's not in 4 yet, but the idea of, I want to teach him the lesson of, before others will respect you, you got to respect yourself. So do something hard that will make you respect yourself. I think that's such an awesome thing that you said.
Man, big, very
cool.
powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I want to ask you, because now you're 40. I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. I'm 45. I still want to push myself into jiu-jitsu, but I feel like the most important thing for me is just, like a friend of mine said to me many years ago, he said, when I train, the number one goal is I want to walk off the mat and be able to come back in a day or two. I don't want to break my body so I can't train for a week or two. So it's that idea of longevity and injury prevention for, older jiu-jitsu people that they fall in love with jiu-jitsu, but maybe they're a 45-year-old attorney, or, they're in the 40s. I've got some black belts at our gym that are early 50s, and I give them so much credit. They still push themselves, their body's hanging in there. But I feel like it's a constant battle for these older people, myself included, just pushing yourself versus getting injured.
Yeah. So for me, all my injuries have pretty much all come from fighting. I have not had very many injuries that happen from jiu-jitsu, right? We have maybe some hand issues or something like that. And not to say that you can't get injured in jiu-jitsu, because you can. Somebody can, he'll hook you, especially if we're training nogi or something, and you could be stubborn and have ego and not tap, and you can get injured for sure. But I started young. So I'm a black belt. I win all the rounds. If you're sitting there, if you're back mounted on everybody for 4 out of the 5 minutes, you're not even physically exhausting yourself, So it's like, that's kind of nice. What I have to deal with is managing the orthopedic issues that I already have done to myself from fighting MMA, right? But for men and women that are trying to get into jiu-jitsu later in life, let's just say after the age of 30, and you never grappled before, you didn't wrestle, the first thing is just be honest with yourself and your own vulnerability. And that's going to take the humility. That's going to take the killing of your ego, because you are not good. You're not good. And you won't be good for quite some time. And I asked my students, I said, did anybody here good at anything in their life? You get a couple people raise their hand. I was like, what were you good at? I said, I was good at baseball. I said, when were you good at baseball? When did you think that you were truly good? He said, at the college level. I had perspective that I was good. I said, so how long did you practice baseball? He said, 15 years.
Wow.
I said, anybody else? Yeah, me. What are you good at? He's like, I'm really good at my job. I said, what's your job? He's an engineer. I said, okay. And how long have you been an engineer? 20 years. Okay. When were you good at engineering? He said, probably right after the 10-year mark. I said, okay, so you had years of college and then 10 years of work before you realized that you were good. Yep. And I was like, okay, well, we have people here in jiu-jitsu that are trying to get good, or what they perceive to be good, in a month. Like, they're trying to wreck everybody. They're trying their hardest. And when I say try the hardest, I mean competitively. I don't mean pay attention to the technique, try to do the techniques the right way, being on your personal journey to try your best. I mean, they are in the bottom of Mount, and they have some level of aspiration that they're about to turn this thing around, and they're going to tap out the black belt that's got them mounted. And that's how you're going to get yourself hurt. Not about arm barring you hurt you. You doing all this stuff, you're going to hurt your own shoulder or neck. You're going to twist your own damn knee. So I would just say, pace yourself. I'm a black belt. I have been doing this a long time. I don't think I'm any good, because ultimately it's who you compare yourself to. That same guy who said that he was good at the college level, he played all-stars when he was 10. Was that 10-year-old just as good as he was when he played in college? Not even close. So good is perspective. I know what good really is. I've trained with some really high-level guys. I have trained with Marcelo Garcia. I know what good is. I'm not any good. And that's okay. So I think that if people just go in and they're starting later in life, they have to just be honest with themselves that they're not good. They're not going to be good for quite some time. Have no ego. Be patient with yourself. Take care of your body. Be in it for the right reasons. And if you do that, you're going to have a nice, long, healthy journey in jiu-jitsu.
Well, that's such good advice. And it's beautiful too. It's like, just have a long-term time horizon, because one of my big regrets is being impatient for things when I was young. And I realized that humans are happiest not when we achieve something, but when we're improving. So if you can just stretch things out as long as you can, that's the secret to happiness. So just having that, like you said, for those new students that have a 10-year time horizon, I'm just going to come in here, have fun, learn, and take my ego out of it. I think that's really, really nice.
I'll also say, when you were young in school, are you good at math? And they'll be like, no, I'm awful at math. And I'll say, how many hours a week did you do math growing up? And they'll be like, well, 1 hour a day times 5, it's 5 hours a week. And I said, and you come in here and do jiu-jitsu twice a week, and after 6 months, you think you're going to be good? When you did math from the time of kindergarten through 12th grade or higher, and you were doing it 5 hours a week and you weren't any good. Why are you in here? And a big thing is this goes back to ego. They compare themselves to others. They don't compare themselves. They're not patient with themselves. They see someone who came in after them. That person might have had a judo or wrestling background. So they've grappled already for 5 years, and then they just surpass them. Or that person comes in surprised, it's like they're 10 years younger, that person that came in after them. It's like, but when they're getting past, they start doing something very unhealthy and they compare themselves to other people. You shouldn't be doing that. If you actually truly have a problem with your progression, you should seek the mentorship of other students, maybe the ones passing you by. Maybe you should say, I am comparing myself to them, but maybe now I'm going to look within and see what are they doing that I'm not doing. Or I'll just ask them, because most academies have a pretty good community of cohesive environment. You can ask the AIs or assistant instructors, or you can just ask the head professor, maybe if they have that time for you. Hey, can I borrow you for 2 minutes? That's the way you do it. But people will just see these other people and they'll be like, man, I don't know why I gave a belt to him and not to me. It's like, hey, obviously there's a reason. And instead of having these poisonous, cancerous thoughts that can really ruin the culture of the academy, ruin the yourself and those other people that should be like kind of like a teammate, in your school, you should just kind of look within and again, ditch that ego. It's not good to compare yourself to other people.
No, that's so healthy for life. I mean, really, we all have different starting places, different physical attributes, where some are older, some are younger. So yeah, follow your own journey in life.
And some people are special and you're not. And you know what? That's okay. I am Marcelo Garcia. I'm okay with that. I am. Like, I cannot be that good. I cannot be alive for 5 lifetimes and be that good. I cannot be like Bruno Malfacini, 10-time world champ. I'm a regular person who just worked really hard and put in more hours than other people to get to my skill set. But I am good enough to know that I'm not any good. But I am good enough to also know, and this should be optimistic for people coming up, that you can be as good as me or better if you just do one thing: come. If you just come and you can stay healthy, and of course, life pulls people in different directions. People have kids, people have wives, people have family illnesses and deaths and financial strife, and things do happen. But if you could just kind of stay on the path, I'm giving you the shit that I have filtered through already. Where I was coming up, and again, all the stuff was kind of geared more toward NHB fighting, but I'm still staying up to date with the newer techniques, and I'm always, going back to the to see what I can do to prefer. I'm giving you the stuff I filtered through and the stuff that we need to be more efficient and effective. And if you just stay with me long enough, I'm going down. I'm getting older. My body's getting less effective. You will pass me if you just marathon, man. That's it. My real goal. That's my real goal, is to make you better than me. You think I like kicking your ass? Again, I got into this to find out what kind of person I can become opposition and through defeat. I want you to be able to give me the business because I want to have to push back. I want to have to look internally. I want to have to keep evolving. It feels good. It should feel good to lose, as long as it doesn't feel bad to lose physically,
Oh, that's beautiful, brother. Thank you so much. MillerMartialArts.us. I'll put a link to your school, but I really appreciate you, man. I really hope I can share the mats with you one day. And I really want to do some shooting with you. I know you're a stud shooting instructor too. So,
and I got another school in Dublin, Georgia. It's called Dublin Jiu-Jitsu. Go check that place out too. But yeah, we can do that next time I come up.
I appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much for the time, Cole.
Yeah, bro. Peace.